And we are live. All right. That's fun. Get our dock ready to go. All righty. Let's get the show on the road. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Friday, May 14th, 2021. Today, we're talking about some of the latest Apple rumors and news to come out of this week, because this is the iMore show. Joining me this week are a couple of special guests, actually. iMore writers Christine Romero-Chan. Hey, Christine.
Hey.
And Luke Filipovich. Hey, Luke.
Hey there. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. Karen will be back with us, I'm assuming, next time, but she's off on some family business this week, prepping for a wedding. So I am joined by our two esteemed writers here. This week is kind of you know what? It's I won't lie. It's kind of a lighter show this week, I feel like, because it's sort of the calm before the storm. It feels like to me.
Yeah, definitely. I get that feeling in a big way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, we've got the new Apple products coming next week. That's the really big focus coming down the pipe. My question for the two of you is, did you order anything that you expect? Did you order anything besides AirTags? And do you have you gotten shipping notifications yet?
No, nothing from me.
Yeah, I didn't order anything. I just went with the AirTags this time around. I'm still waffling. I still kind of want an M1 iMac. I still kind of want one, but like I'm moving to a new place in a couple weeks, and I got some moving expenses and stuff to take care of. So I don't want to, don't really want to rock the boat too much on my financial side yet. But I do. I'm thinking about it. It still creeps into my mind at night, being like, you should get one.
Get it. Do it. That is like a subsonic signal coming from your iPhone speaker directly from Cupertino telling you, get the iMac, Luke, you want it.
Yeah, probably. Is that what the vaccine does?
Lets everybody know that you're ready for an iMac.
Yeah, okay, cool. That's good.
Yeah. As I've mentioned before on the show, I'm getting the new iPad and the new white Magic Keyboard, but I've yet to receive a shipping notification. I mean, I'm theoretically supposed to get the keyboard long before I get the iPad Pro. So
you went with the 12.9 inch, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah.
Just all the money.
Biggest available iPad screen for me. That's what I look for. So yeah, we're kind of in this holding pattern until that happens, but it doesn't mean nothing happened this week. I think, speaking of AirTags, Luke, we've got a new competitor, a more true competitor to AirTags is coming on the market soon. In fact, went up for pre-order this week. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about the Chipolo One Spot?
Yeah, so Chipolo's been in the tracking game for a while now, the Bluetooth trackers, and they actually have a really good product. I've used several. I know a couple other people who have used several, and like they're pretty good. They were always like, I kind of always felt they were a bit better than Tile. Like Tile kind of like started the whole thing, but then Chipolo kind of came along and started to take a little bit of wind out of their sails, maybe. And we had heard that Chipolo was working on a tracker that would work with the Find My network, and now this is it. This is the Chipolo One Spot. The big things are it's like $1 cheaper than an AirTag. It sells for $28 rather than $29. And if you want 4 of them, it also comes in a 4-pack for $90. And also it has a key ring like in it. So you don't have to drill your own key ring, or you don't technically need any sort of like accessory to actually attach it to a set of keys, which I think is going to be, a pretty big deal for some people. Like I'm happy with my AirTags. I got just the cheap little, for my keys, I just got the cheap little like Belkin plastic case that they have, which was like $15. I'm happy with it. I think that's good. I didn't really want to wait for Chipolo because I'd waited for AirTags for so long. I just wanted to get something because I had been considering buying a tile for a while, but I kept hearing about AirTags, so I waited. But I think the fact that this is, $28, it's essentially the same price. It is $1 cheaper, but it's essentially the same price for one. And the fact that you don't need anything else to attach it to a set of keys, I think will be fairly awesome for a lot of people. I think a lot of people will probably see that as a plus. The other thing that I think might be the biggest plus is it's actually louder than an AirTag. So AirTags max out at, I believe it's 60 decibels, if I remember correctly. If somebody has that number.
I thought it was 80.
Maybe it's 80. That sounds more realistic. But I know that the one spot goes up to 120, which is definitely louder than the AirTags. And
loud.
I would say if that's my one, now that I've used AirTags, now that I've had them for a couple weeks now, I think if I had one main criticism is I do wish they were louder.
Yeah.
Like even in my apartment, I'm looking for my wallet, my keys constantly, which is where I have my two AirTags right now. And like I can hear it, but it's like more faint than you want it to be when you're trying to look around and like actually, use your ears to locate the human sort of echolocation that AirTags provides for people. I do wish it was louder. That's probably like my biggest complaint about AirTags. I think everything else works awesome. So the Chipolo One Spot, like if you don't have AirTags yet, this works with the Find My network. So it has the exact same, like when you lose it, it's going to be using the Find My network to find it, which means it's going to have all the access to all those Apple devices, all those iPhones out there to be able to track down your missing item. So it kind of seems like it's the best of both worlds a little bit. Like you get the Apple's Find My network, which is great. And then you also kind of get, get Chipolo's, like you get a tracker that's just a tad cheaper, doesn't need an accessory, and is louder. It kind of seems like maybe if you haven't bought AirTags yet and you were kind of waffling on it, like this is a very good secondary option.
It doesn't have the precision finding feature though. And
this is true.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, which once again, for someone like me, I don't have an iPhone. I'm still running an iPhone 10, so I don't even have the U1 chip, which means I can't even use that feature either. So if you do have an iPhone 11 or iPhone 12, you are going to be able to do, the location tracking where like you can pull out your phone and it'll tell you exactly how to get there once you're within like 50 feet of it. But yeah, so Chipolo doesn't have that. But if you're using an older iPhone like I am, like that might not matter to you. You might not be able to take advantage of it anyways for AirTags. So I think it's a pretty awesome product actually. And I kind of expected it to be like, I didn't expect it to be like, it's weird to me that they priced it like $1 cheaper. And I don't know whose decision that was, like, because Apple obviously has some sort of stake in this, right? Like I'm assuming for Chipolo using the Find My network, there's got to be like some sort of deal there, right? You would think, maybe?
Is it... See, what kind of mystifies me about this whole third-party Find My initiative is there hardware involved? Like, is it an MFI style program that has these companies use, say, certified chips? Like, does Apple get any royalties off the One Spot? Yeah,
I'm curious about that. Because in one way you would think no, because it is a hardware, like you said, it is a hardware device. But then in the other one, they are using Apple's infrastructure for the app side of things. So it does make me wonder if there is any sort of like royalty or some sort of deal there. I don't know. But I was kind of surprised that it's $28. Like I kind of thought, I expected it to be cheaper. I definitely expected it to be cheaper. But I kind of thought it would be like, I know this maybe it's like pinching pennies at this point, but I actually thought it was maybe going to be like $25 because that's like kind of what other Chipolo trackers are around. And like the fact that they made it just $1 cheaper is like very weird to me. It's like
a weird kind of pettiness almost.
Right? It's like I guess like in some ways, I guess it's good for Apple because, you know, Apple does technically, especially if you have an iPhone that can take advantage of it, it does sort of have that extra location tracking, precision tracking feature. And that might be enough of a selling point that somebody can spend an extra dollar. But once again, if you want it for keys, then you're going to need something to attach your keys to. So then it's not actually becoming an extra dollar, which is something we've talked about before. So maybe it was actually good. Maybe it was actually good that they went like, you know, get a little more profit. If like it's essentially an AirTag, it just is missing one feature, mark it down $1 and there you go. You don't need anything else. You just need the tracker, the one spot, and you're done. So maybe that was actually a good play. Gets Chipolo or, you know, a little bit more money in the pocket. It's not like $28 is an outrageous price. I think it's very reasonably priced for what it does. So maybe that's a good play. Maybe that's the way. It's technically cheaper, and you don't need an accessory with it if you want to attach it to your keys.
I'll tell you one thing that kind of disappoints me about the One Spot is Chipolo's other Chipolo One trackers have all these different colors. Like you can get in red and yellow and green and stuff like that, and it's just they call it almost black for the One Spot. It's this you got the one color. One thing to stress, and I know we've talked about this on the show before, is that while regular Chipolos that connect through the Chipolo app have those leave behind alerts, the One Spot does not, because it uses the Find My network. If Apple were to update the Find My app to have that feature for AirTags, I assume any product that can connect to the Find My network would also be able to gain those alerts. But yeah, it currently does not have those. Yeah, if I was just looking for a key tracker and just a key tracker, this would be very tempting. But since I already have my own AirTags anyway, and I have them on other things other than just keys, it's less so. I will say one thing that's very appealing is that I'm less worried about scratching up a plastic disc than I am this apparently very scuffable stainless steel. Like at some point, I'm just going to have to let go and face the fact that it's just going to be scuffed forever. But I haven't yet. I'm not there. So, yeah. Christine, are you at all tempted by the Chipolo One Spot? And do you have other things that you want to track with them?
They're actually sending me one, so I'm gonna review it. So it's like on the way.
So we'll see how tempted Christine is after she reviews it. Check that out.
And I just looked it up to double check. It is 60 decibels that the AirTags max out at. Okay. So this is twice as loud. It's twice as loud as an AirTag. Which that's the main selling feature for me. Like, is just because the way that I use my AirTags, I like when it's just essentially lost in my place or in my car or whatever. I do find especially if it's under things or, you know, in a bag somewhere or, you know, it makes its way into the couch or whatever, it is like kind of hard to hear. And it's like you want that loud sound when you're trying to locate something with your ears rather than, you know, your eyes. So
Luke, I take it that since you have acquired some AirTags, you have actually made use of them, not just testing use, but actual use of them.
Oh yeah. I constantly misplace my keys in my wallet, like constantly. Like in fact, now it's almost become a habit where, like, you know, when I'm going to leave the house, whether it's shopping or whatever I'm doing, like, you know, obviously I need my keys and wallet with me. I just pull out my phone and just immediately look. Like I don't even look around my place anymore. I literally just pull out find my app and start hitting the button, because I have tried so many times to try and keep myself organized with my keys in my wallet, and it just doesn't work. They always end up in weird places. They always end up somewhere.
You know, one of these days you're going to do that, and your hand is going to start ringing because you have them in your hand.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now we have some real world tests on the usefulness of AirTags. That's good. Yeah, I having said that, Luke, makes me think that, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, but, you know, WWDC is coming up. I wouldn't mind seeing in iOS 15 the Shortcuts app gain AirTag functions, or at least Find My functions, like ring this AirTag. Like, just have a button. You open your home screen, you hit that button, and there are your keys. You don't have to dig around in the apps.
That would be super great.
That would be ideal. All right. So yeah, that's the Chipolo one spot. It's interesting that we're finally we're actually getting essentially third party AirTags at this point. And so soon after the initial launch. Although right now it is just pre-orders.
True.
So what next? We're going to move on to some rumors, because we got some interesting stuff this week, and we're going to start with MacBooks. So last week we talked about the rumor that color would be coming to the MacBooks, and we speculated it would probably be the MacBook Air and not the MacBook Pro, because as we all know, professionals, super serious professionals like the three of us, hate color. We want black devices. Just dark.
Actually, I would want a colored MacBook.
Yeah. Yes. This is I want an iPhone 12 blue MacBook Pro. I want fill in, use all of the crayons, Apple. That's what I want here. So John Prosser, the ever leaking John Prosser, which I'm sure he would be thrilled at that title. The ever leaking John Prosser has published some renders of what he's calling the updated the next gen MacBook Air, with probably an M2, but very prominently with color in the design. Now, these are based off, I think, photos that he's seen, and then he worked with a renderer like he usually does to make these. And I gotta say, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting design, because it is a departure from literally every other MacBook Air design that has ever been. So, Christine, do you want to walk us through this a little bit?
Yeah, so like the MacBook Air has been known to have that like wedge design. Mm-hmm. This new render doesn't have that wedge design. It's more like, I believe, like the MacBook Pros, I think.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So it's like there's no more wedge, and the keyboard is white instead of black, and it has that like Touch ID sensor, like like the new iMac Magic Keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it comes in like the pastel colors of the iMac.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's very interesting moving to a what seems to be like it would be a very thin, more symmetrical design than the MacBook Air has ever had. It's the renders look great. I think the renders look great. I'm not stoked about a white keyboard, because that is probably going to get dirty. I'm very curious to see how the white Magic keyboard.
I kind of like the white keyboard. It reminds me of when I had a white plastic MacBook.
It goes well with the pastel colors, I'll say that.
Yeah.
Like, just like on the new Magic keyboards and Magic mice and trackpads for the iMacs. They go well with the colors.
Oh, and there's a white bezel. I'm not too big on that.
Yeah. Now, I noticed this last week. Apparently, those on the iMac, those bezels are light gray, and I wonder if that ends up being the same thing on the new MacBooks, if indeed they adopt these kinds of colors, which it seems like they will. It follows a sort of, well, tradition is a strong word, but the pattern kind of established by the iPad Air last year, and now the iMac. These MacBooks having the same lighter, more pastel colors does make sense. Even though I'd really like darker colors like the iPhone 12 has. Darker, more vibrant colors. Well, not necessarily darker, but more vibrant.
Yeah. I will say about the white keyboard, like I agree, at least in the renders, it looks good. I think a black keyboard would probably look out of place. I think that's the same thing sort of with like, I agree. I don't like the white bezels or the light gray bezels. I kind of wish they were just black, but I do understand that they look a bit better. Like aesthetically, it looks a little better, I think, with the pastel colors rather than such a harsh black tone. But when you're viewing content and stuff, there's no way I'm going to think that a white bezel or a light gray bezel is going to look better. But
yeah.
That being said, as somebody who's used like the Apple like Magic Keyboard since I got my first iMac back in like 2016, and this is what I use every day, it's like it does get dirty. You'll notice stuff on it, but if you clean it and keep it clean, like you'll notice a bit of discoloration over time, but it's not too bad really. Like it's still fairly white. And like you can notice on like some of the edges of the keys, if you're like really looking closely, you can notice like some discoloration from I guess over time. But I think for the most part, if you kind of make a point to clean it every now and then and kind of keep it, keep your hands as free from chip dust and things like that as you possibly can. I don't think you'll actually see like too much. It'll take a while before I think you'd notice any sort of discoloration. So I'm not too worried about the aesthetics of it getting ruined by the white keyboard, which I know some people that really bothers them. Dark colors are much harder to see stuff like that. So, but I would say like over time, at least if it's anything like the Magic Keyboard that we know and somewhat begrudgingly love sometimes, then I think like it probably won't be too big of a deal. Plus, there's always like you can always buy like a keyboard cover, which a lot of people do for their iMacs just to keep crumbs and stuff out of them and whatnot, or not their iMacs, their MacBooks. So there's options out there. I don't think the white keyboard will be too much of an issue. And I do think that like, I agree. It definitely looks aesthetically pleasing at least with the way the renders have turned it out.
Yeah. One thing that occurs to me is that something I think Apple's gotten a lot better at over the past several years is sort of their color durability on their devices. I remember my very first Apple laptop was actually a 2008 MacBook Pro, and especially under my right wrist, the right wrist space or left wrist. I can tell left from right. What are you talking about? My left wrist space and I think it was a lot because of my watch. The sort of aluminum sort of coating, the silver color kind of had worn away by the time I stopped using it. And that has not in the 7 years that I've had my current MacBook Pro, that has not happened at all. They have done a lot for color durability. Yeah, I really appreciate it. I like this design overall. I think moving away, treating any design as sort of sacred, I think leads to trouble. But I do like this one to be more in line with the MacBook Pro. What I assume the MacBook Pro will look like. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. I think making the family line up a little more makes sense. The big question I have here is, John Prosser calls this the MacBook Air. I wonder if they're going to make the names make a little more sense. Because right now we have a MacBook Air, we have a MacBook Pro, we don't have a MacBook. That's not a thing that we've got.
Well, people want the 14-inch MacBook.
Yeah, but that's still rumored to be a MacBook Pro. A 14-inch MacBook Pro, a 16-inch MacBook Pro, maybe the current 13-inch MacBook Pro just becomes the MacBook. I'm not sure people are so dedicated to say the MacBook Air name. It's more about the price. But like the last time they had a MacBook, it didn't do so great, probably because it was more expensive than the MacBook Air, which has always, let's say always, since it existed, it's been one of the, not even since it existed, since like 2010, when they introduced the 11-inch. They had the 11 and 13-inch MacBook Airs. they've been the, I think, cheapest new Apple laptops that you could get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's the bigger deal for most people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of wonder about that too. I talked about it before, where like, does Apple bring back like just the MacBook, and then does that become, maybe that becomes the middle tier in the MacBook Air, since it's so associated with that price point. Like, does that become like the more lower end model? Then you have MacBook Air, MacBook, and MacBook Pro, which would be a little weird since they used to do it sort of the other way, but kind of not. But like you said, they never really found a lot of success with just the MacBook. It kind of was like too similar in a way to the MacBook Air, I guess, and like it didn't really offer anything that the MacBook Air didn't, and then the MacBook Air was cheaper, so it was kind of a weird product. So like, if this happens to be like, let's just speculate for a second and say this does happen to be like just a MacBook, and they're kind of bringing that back. I mean, that kind of maybe sort of fits in with, maybe not as much with the maybe not as much with the iMac that they just announced, but maybe if you think about it as, the iPad Air compared to the baseline iPad, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's weird. It is like their naming schemes are always kind of interesting, and we'll have to see what happens. The other thing too is like, it seems not that long ago that a MacBook Air, like the MacBook Air with M1 launched. Like, it really doesn't seem that long ago. It seems like it's so close for it to be like, but I guess we don't know when this one's going to come out, right? There's not really any big indications that it's going to be coming soon, I don't think, from what I can tell. But who knows? I'm interested to see if, like, is this just next year's? Like, are we not going to see it until November? Are we going to see it before then? Because if we are going to see it before then it's like, is it a MacBook Air or is it something else? Is it like a new line or something? Because like, you would think, like, typically, not always, but typically they do like about yearly refreshes for a lot of their. Sometimes they double up if they're going to a new model or a new size or a new something like that. But like. And I guess this would be a new design, so maybe it would just be a good way to showcase the M2 chip if that's what they're going to throw into this thing. So I don't know. There's a lot of interesting questions about what this could be. I got to say, I'm a huge fan, as somebody who uses a MacBook Air as his like daily computer, an old one, a 2018. I'm a fan of like moving away from the wedge design. Not that the wedge design is horrible in any way, but it's just like, I think the squared off sides, especially when they did that with the iPhone again this past year. Like, I just love that look so much. I know it's not everybody does, but I just love it so much, and I think it like looks really nice on a laptop for sure.
I would like to see them bring that also to the lid, to the display lid. Strangely enough, like, to make it look a little more like two iPads or iPad Airs stuck together. Maybe both are a little. Maybe the keyboard side is a little thinner than usual, but the display side is a little thicker than usual, and thus it holds a better camera.
There you go. That would be
1080p.
Right? That would be good. That would be nice.
Because we're getting 4K cameras in the iPad Pro now, so let's get a wiggle on getting that into the MacBook line. Come on, Apple. Mm-hmm. We all want this, and get that center stage thing into the MacBooks too. That was a cool demo during the event for the iPad Pro. Let's get that onto Macs too. Yeah, that's new iPads. There's also speaking of thicker devices, there is a new report from Kuo Ming-chi, that the new 12 Pro, or the new 12 Pro, the 13 Pro line especially, well, actually all of the 13 line, it seems, will be both thinner and thicker. And it's mostly about the camera bump. Actually, they might not be thinner devices, but it does look like the camera bump, according to this report, is getting a little thicker. And I'm just, at a certain point, I don't like that we have camera bumps on our phones. I understand.
Yeah, I hate them.
I understand it's an ever onward march towards maximally thin, but it really isn't, because we have those giant bumps on the backs of our phones. Just make them flush. Just make the phone thicker, and yes, heavier, as punishment for the sin of wanting all of those cameras on one device.
Right.
Make everything just a uniform thickness. There were those leaks, I think yesterday, of the Pixel 6. I don't know if you saw those, but it has a camera bump that it's like a long strip style camera bump going across the entirety of the back of the phone. And I just think, what hath we wrought? What have we done to ourselves, where we think like we want thinner phones, but also we have to, if we want our cases to be flush with the rest of our phones, we actually have to, if we want the phones to be or the cameras to be flush with the rest of the phones, we actually have to put a giant thick case on it so that it doesn't just stick out as a little bump, and have our phones at an angle, or that we can tap a corner to wiggle them. Why do we do this to ourselves is really my question here. Yeah, the iPhone 13 Pro camera system is expected to measure about 36 by 37 millimeters. So it's not just thicker, it's also wider. That takes up more of the back of the phone, which at that point, surely we can ditch 2 of those 3 cameras, throw in a larger sensor, and just have one camera that has a periscope zoom. Surely we can do this. The cameras make me irrationally angry. And they have since 2014, when the iPhone 6 debuted with the first camera bump.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. I don't think I have quite as many problems with the camera bump as you do, Joe, but I do understand the argument that like we're trying to make phones thinner because that's what people apparently want, but then again we're also trying to get like better cameras into these phones because that's also what people want, and those two things don't necessarily go together, right? Like, if you want better cameras and you want better, sensors and things, they're going to be bigger. They're going to need more space. So I would agree with you, Joe. If they want to go the route of making them flush, then like make the phone a little bigger. It's not like you're making it that much bigger at the end of the day, and then it's flush, and then you don't have to worry about it. But there is this bit of like, in the smartphone world, there is a bit of like, they want thin phones, but we also want really good cameras. And I feel like the solution we have right now is thin phones with camera bumps that make the phone not that thin, at least at one specific place. And like, you might not care about it. Like, I don't really care too much about it. Like, it does kind of suck that when you put it down, it like wobbles, and like that's not the greatest thing in the world. And yes, then it makes cases thicker if you're trying to find a way to make it flush when you like sit it down, then you need like a thick case. But yeah, I think it's weird because it's also like, Joe, when you said like, why not just like have one camera with like a much bigger sensor and has a little bit of a periscope zoom in it and things. And I'm just like, I'm not saying that'll never happen, but aren't we also in this weird mode where like cell phone manufacturers seem to want to put as many cameras as they possibly can as a selling feature? Yeah. Like, there's phones out there with 4 or 5 freaking 6 cameras on them at different focal lengths and, things like that. And it's just like, I think we do have this mentality of like more is more rather than less is more sometimes when it comes to cell phones, I think. And I wonder if Apple announced a phone where they did that, where they like kind of combined all 3 cameras into one, I'm curious at like how that would play out. you know, like how people would, you know, I'm sure we would see the endless amount of hot takes about how, you know, they're regressing in camera technology rather than, you know, progressing and things like that, which is probably not true if they actually put it all into
It would
one
be the
camera.
opposite of true.
Right. So it's interesting to me. Like, I also wonder where like the social or like the collective consciousness of it all. I wonder how much plays into like the design of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And Carlos in the chat, yes, I am particularly upset that camera bumps have come to iPads. Like, why is that even a thing? That's not necessary. The thing that intrigues me about the idea of a single sensor is that the size of the sensor that you could get into, especially like this theoretical iPhone 13 camera bump, if you were going with a single sensor, is you could probably get something at least close to an ASPC size sensor, which, for those that don't know, that's what most DSLRs have. They're DSLRs that are full frame, where they have a full 35 millimeter sensor. ASPC is also known as a crop frame sensor. It is what most standalone DSLR cameras have, and mirrorless cameras. The iPhone sensor, meanwhile, is the size of like my pinky nail. Is tiny, and because it's tiny, it doesn't collect as much light. And so, if you try to say increase the megapixel count of those sensors, each of those pixels is going to collect less light. So it's not going to perform as well in low light until Apple develops the technology to let that happen. Whereas if they get a larger sensor, they could put more pixels. They could say have like a 16 or even 24 megapixel sensor, each of those pixels gathering more light than, say, the current, what are we at, 12? Still 12?
Yeah.
We've been at 12 for forever, and I just kind of imagined we bumped it up, but no, we actually didn't. And so you would have a better performing sensor, a bigger sensor, yes, bigger photos probably, but you know, there's a lot of this computational photography that Apple's engaged in. I mean, applying that to better raw photos would be impressive. Would be even more impressive than it is today. But a lot of the computational photography that Apple's engaged in is to make up for some of the problems of dealing with sensors that are the size of a pinky nail. I think.
Yeah, for sure. It would be cool to see larger sensors just in general. Like I for one would actually be, I would actually probably prefer, even if let's just say we don't make it some super camera that can do everything, but I would rather probably just have one camera that's just a standard camera, but if has a larger sensor and can handle light better, get a little more megapixels in there where it's actually useful, that to me would be like a better iPhone photography experience than having, maybe the 3 options for me personally. Yeah, or 4 or 5 or however many options there's gonna be on the iPhone 13. It should only be 3 from everything we know, or everything that's rumored. But who knows? Maybe they'll come out with a 6 camera model. We don't know. I think, Joe, you're totally right. Like, using sensors that are so small, that's the, and obviously it's part of it. You can't, it is a cell phone at the end of the day. It is not a camera. It is a smartphone. It is meant to do more than one thing. It is not meant to be a dedicated camera. And if you really, really, really care about that, you probably already have a dedicated camera. Like Joe or like myself or like lots of other people. But it would be nice, like, good smartphone camera is always, first of all, great as a backup. Great if you don't have your camera because you weren't expecting to have to take pictures, but something cool happens or you want to do something. Like, there's lots of great reasons for an iPhone camera to be so much better than it is now. And it's not even that they're bad now. It's just like there are issues with having sensors so small. And Joe, like you brought up, that photography, the computational photography that lots of these manufacturers are getting into, are like trying to use software as best as they can to make up for a lack of better hardware. And there's only, as good as you can make that, like, better hardware is always going to outclass software, at least when it comes to cameras. So it would be cool. Like, it would be interesting if Apple ever really wanted to design a phone that, like, where the Pro was meant as in pro photography, I wonder how they would tackle that, and I wonder if like just less cameras but better sensors and better like equipment would be the way to go.
Yeah. So yeah, we just spent a lot of time talking about iPhone cameras. I didn't know I had that much to say. Right off the top of my head. The other thing I wanted to bring up about the iPhone 13 is a new rumor this morning that it's apparently going to have it's supposedly going to have a smaller Face ID chip, which goes along with the rumor that the notch is shrinking. That makes total sense. Yes, I assume the dot sensor and the dot projector and those sensors are going to be, more tightly packed as well if the notch is indeed shrinking. And Christine, you are the advocate among us for just any progress on the notch size.
Yeah, I've been wanting a smaller notch for like forever. So
ever since there was a notch, Christine wanted it to be smaller.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Although I really wish they would kind of bring back Touch ID, but like under the screen or something.
I think that's still a rumor. I don't know that it's been rumored that no, they're not doing that. It's just that there's been no news on that front.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised. I will say, I've been thinking about in discussions with some colleagues. Over the last couple of weeks, one of the things I've decided that as soon as there's if Touch ID under the screen is indeed a thing, Apple Watch unlock for my iPhone is being turned off. I have security. Yeah. I have concerns.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I think this rumor makes sense especially if the notch is indeed shrinking. I still am on team thinner notch rather than narrower notch. It seems like we're getting a narrower notch, but I'd prefer it to recede more into the top of the phone rather than just shrink that way. I feel like there's even just the barest amount more utility in getting a smaller rather than narrower notch. It's that less prominent in, say, watching a video.
Yeah.
But alas, we're not there yet. I'm really just waiting for it all to go behind the screen.
Yeah.
Including the camera. Just send the camera behind the screen. It'll take fine photos from out behind pixels. Don't worry about it. Or do it this year, Apple. I did want to spend some time, and maybe we'll wrap up on this, but I wanted to talk about in the next few weeks, let's see, we are now less than a month out from WWDC. We're all very excited about it and not at all tired already. But there's some interesting concepts that are floating around recently. I think this is not Parker Ortolani. This is Angelo Libero, who has some interesting concepts for iOS 15 and iPadOS 15. And I kind of wanted to talk about what we're hoping to see out of WWDC in terms of those particular pieces of software. I got to tell you, the idea for a much different app library on the iPad really intrigues me. Like something that is made for iPad. That's kind of what I hope the theme of iPadOS this year is. It is much more made for iPad than iPadOS has even been in the last couple of years. Christine, what are you looking forward to most out of
customization?
Customization. Yeah, you had so this week you wrote your editorial on customization.
Yeah.
And just how? Yeah, I'm with you there. Just give me options to put in real custom icons.
I just want to change to custom app icons from within the app instead of having to go through shortcuts and doing it like
even settings
one by one.
Even in settings, I'd take that. But just you're right. Yeah, actual app icon changes so I could still get badges when I wanted them.
Yeah.
Because you can't do that right now with the shortcut. Yeah, Luke, have you played around with customization at all?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I have some custom, shortcuts on that I made and with different images and that and stuff. Yeah, it's cool. I think I agree. It would be nice if that was more robust and more, that there was more options and it was more easily done rather than doing this, the shortcut to figure it all that out. And I think the big thing is like, I miss my badge notifications, right? Like there's some apps where I just I stopped using my custom one because I was just like, this was stupid not to have badge notifications on it. Like messages. Like I changed messages was one of the first ones I changed. And then I was like, wait, not having badge notifications on messages is bad. That's a problem. That's a problem. I can't. I don't remember what. Like I always had to pull down my notification center and which I do on, for certain things. But it's just to do that every time rather than just be able to quickly look at the screen and see that I have 10 messages or 3 messages or whatever. So yeah, I definitely would love to see that be more robust. That would be great. I think I'm excited to see where widgets go.
Yeah.
I would love to see more customizableness if that's a word.
Customizability?
Yeah, customizability maybe. In widgets to maybe even obviously for third-party apps, that's kind of on developers and the tools that developers have. But for first-party apps, for Apple stuff, it would be nice if there was more options and it would be cool if you could even resize them slightly to different not just the standard box, bigger box kind of thing.
Yeah, I want to see more interactive stuff too.
Yeah, Christine, you've talked about that a lot. You want some more. You want them to be more usable as just mini apps almost.
Yeah, and so instead of just launching the app.
A music widget that actually plays and pauses and skips forward. And that would be nice.
That would be really awesome. That would definitely be on my list too for what I'd like to see in widgets is actually interactive widgets would be great.
I almost feel like the addition of widgets and you could technically do custom icons for a little while with shortcuts. It just came to more prominence this year. And so much so that Apple changed around how that functionality works just to accommodate customizers.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think maybe Apple was taken a little aback by the popularity of both widgets and customization, and I hope that they had enough time, and I think they probably did because it was right as iOS 14 hit. I hope they had enough time to add serious customization features and better widget features for iOS 15. Maybe they were planning some updates for widgets anyway, perhaps greater interactivity. I hope, in terms of widgets, that we see full anywhere on the screen support for widgets in iPadOS. That is my dream, is to just have my first page full of widgets.
I want to see theming.
Yeah. That's the thing. I think for both of us, Christine, this is if you give a mouse a cookie situation for both of us. Because if you give us the cookie of icon customization, we're going to want the glass of milk that is full on theming.
Yeah.
The stuff you can do on Android is really kind of unreal. For anyone who hasn't played around with it, you can just do all kinds of customizations. Everything is just text. You can put all sorts of custom colors and controls and widgets even. And I'd personally, in terms of style, I'd like to see developers be able to deliberetely create fully transparent widgets that just have certain controls that you can see. But they're apps that allow workaround for that, but they require you to take a screenshot of your home screen, and it's kind of a mess. It's really hacky and it's kind of a mess. So yeah, these are the things I want out of iOS 15.
Well, if any, and I mean, it's not that even Apple needed to prove this because Android is living proof every day, but the appetite is out there, and there's people who if you give them the tools to make, if they open up some sort of theme store in the App Store, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they come out with their own themes or whatever, you're going to get so many developers that want to jump in on that, right? Brands are going to want to jump in on that. Artists are going to want to jump in. It's a whole new, it can really open up a whole new world for, not just us as people being able to appreciate those themes and be able to, install them and things like that, but also like it gives developers and artists and companies like new revenue streams, new ways to engage with their audience and things like that. I think it'd be really cool. And I've always been wondered if Apple goes down that route and they kind of become a little more customizable, which like seems very highly implausible with the way that Apple likes to run things. But I always wondered if maybe they would do it in stages, they're not going to all of a sudden open everything up and it's going to be like Android. But I wonder if could they do themes where they have app kits and it changes the way the apps look and maybe changes the font or something like that. Even something little like that, but then they open that up and they give that API or that technology, those tools to developers to be like, hey, make your own custom theme, make your, and then it can work with different app icons or whatever. And I feel even that as a small step, I think they would realize how big the appetite is out there for that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it would be really cool if they went down that route. I'm not holding my breath though, that's for sure.
I think it's really interesting. One of the things I heard, especially around widgets before Apple actually announced widgets, is, if Apple, widgets aren't that popular on Android, and that's probably true. Most widgets are probably used on Android, or at least were before iOS, because when Apple moves into a market, they create an awareness of that market.
Mm-hmm.
But most of them were probably used by some of the more hardcore enthusiast users that really do care about tweaking the look and feel of their OS a lot. And now we've seen widgets exploded in popularity. How long was Widgetsmith the top free app on the App Store? Weeks and weeks and weeks after iOS 14 launched. And one of the things I keep thinking of, Luke, I think you're exactly right. Apple, listen up. This is another store you can open up where you can charge a 30% commission, and people will pay for this stuff.
We'll see how the trial goes out, but
don't listen to Luke. It's 30% commission.
But no, I totally agree with you. They can open up a section in the App Store, put it at the bottom where it says themes, and it's it's custom wallpapers, it's custom app icons, it's custom fonts for menu settings and things like that. It would be huge. It really would be really, really huge.
And I think the way they could probably do this, widgets that are solely for appearance. I know that there are Widgetsmith has appearance-based widgets, but things that can really change how a play control looks or how wallpaper behaves, things like that. How icons appear, you can have tiny icons that you can place anywhere. Let us place icons anywhere on the screen. 2K21, by the way, there's a customization I want. Let me put my icons on my home screen in a U shape.
Yeah.
I don't need no stinking grid. One of the more intriguing bits about the iOS 15 concept is the idea of split screen on iPhone. Now this is a feature that Android has had for a while.
Yeah.
I think it's possible. I this year I definitely think it's more possible than I would have said last year. But last year we got picture in picture on iPhone.
Yeah.
And so when it came first to iPad, and it's sort of that rule of technology. It's always easier to make things bigger before you shrink them down.
Mm-hmm.
So we might be seeing that in terms of software as well. Having two apps side by side, I think in this case, Coinbase and Stocks, those are great apps to have side by side. Check the stonks, check the Doge. It's I think it's very interesting. One thing that I want more than ever recently for iPadOS, but if split screen comes to iOS itself, I would love it for this, is sort of predefined app groups. I hit a button and these two apps will open up side by side, in split view every time I hit a particular button.
Yeah. That would be cool. That would be where ultimately if split screen was going to be useful to me, it would be that's what I would do. I would want to probably have preset apps that I open together.
And I don't know if either of you find this in your usage of the iPad, but there are always apps, or there are apps that I always want to open, say, in slide over. I never want them to open full screen. And I especially don't want that to happen when, say, I'm like in Safari. So I use Tot from Icon Factory as my little scratchpad app. I love it. It's great. But when I want to use Tot, I never want it full screen. It's just a giant full screen notepad. I don't need that. So I'll, it's on my dock, and so I'm in Safari, and so hey, I want to take a note of that thing. I'll swipe up my dock, and I'll tap Tot, and every so often it will have cycled out of the slide over carousel, and it will take me to the full screen app. I want a setting where that never happens. I want to always, when I'm in another app, always open this and slide over. I think we can, that sort of minute power user control is what a certain set of iPad users certainly want, that I think other people would end up benefiting from. One thing I do want to talk about before we go, only got a few minutes left, but Luke, you I think it was late last week or early this week. Again, time is an illusion, and this is really the message you should take away from this program every week. Time is fake. But you wrote an editorial about the new iPad Pro and how it's a story half told.
Yeah, I mean, like when it was announced, when the iPad Pro 2021 was announced, it was like I kind of just sat there and was like, this is really cool. It's going to be so powerful, but like, does it need more power? Like, does the iPad Pro need more power right now? Like, is anybody sitting there with an iPad Pro the 2020 last year's version and being like, this isn't powerful enough? I'm not sure that's really the complaint most people have with it. And so it makes me feel like once again, I don't know, but it makes me feel like iPadOS 15 might finally, kind of like what Joe alluded to a little earlier, like it might be like the one where they actually really break it out and be like, this is now for iPad. This is designed for iPad. Like, yes, it's based on iOS, but it's not an iPhone thing. It is very much an iPad thing. And I feel like now, like, there's no excuse for them to not have they have the power. They have the power to do pretty much anything that they want to do with the iPad. Heck, they have the power to put macOS on iPad if they want to. I don't think they do, but they could if they and I'm not saying everybody does, but they could do that if they wanted to at this point. So it's interesting to me. I'm really interested to see what iPadOS 15 is really going to bring. I think there's a lot of been like some long time nagging issues that people have had, like around, multitasking is not that smooth of an experience on iPad Pro. It could probably be handled a lot better. That could probably use a big redesign and situation rather than what it is now. So yeah, I think for me it's just like, it's cool that the iPad Pro 2021 is here. Like, putting the M1 chip in an iPad, it was like, I mean, probably the obvious choice, but also like really cool. I was like, oh, I kind of didn't expect them to do that. Even though I was like, I figured they would, they throw in an A14X or whatever it is and they call it a day. It's more powerful. It does all the same stuff. But like, it seems like if they don't do something with iPadOS, like something more drastic, something that's more focused on using the power that's inside the iPad Pro, it's kind of just a bunch of wasted potential.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of power sitting there that nobody's using. And if that ends up being the case, for a lot of people, like, maybe it's not worth your money then. If it's not actually going to do any of the stuff better that you want it to do, and it's just going to be the same old story. So I feel like this is the time, like, for Apple's really, especially with M1 chips and its own silicon, it's really trying to, I think, push the envelope of, how fast and how streamlined their whole OS and everything can be. And I think like iPadOS 15 has the potential to really blow the iPadOS open, and specifically for the iPad Pro. I think like it's completely possible that maybe we'll even see features in iPadOS 15 that are like specific to the Pro models, the ones that have the M1, rather than, and I think that's like, that only makes sense to me, is like, I feel like Apple's gearing up for something big. And I hope so. I hope that's what it is. I want people to be happy. I want it to be like a more useful platform for the people who really want to use it in a pro setting. Like it's only so good. It has so many setbacks right now. If Apple can eliminate those setbacks, it's only going to be good for them and good for consumers. So,
yeah, absolutely. Well said. Well said. I do think that story is about to be told. Just in just a few weeks. I do think at least some of it. I would be surprised if we don't see at least one of Apple's like Pro Mac apps actually make its way down to the iPad. Maybe Final Cut, maybe Logic, something like that.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are kind of suspecting that, and I agree that kind of makes sense. Like, first of all, I know I said this earlier. I don't think they want to, and I don't necessarily think they should put macOS on an iPad, even though they could if they wanted to, I'm sure. But I do think like Pro Mac apps, if they can make those run, which I mean they can, they run on M1 as of now. Like those coming down to the iPad, I think would help a lot of people. I think a lot of people would be really excited about that. And I think like Joe said, I think Final Cut and Logic are probably like the two main ones that people are like really eyeing to see what they do with.
Yeah. All right. We've come down to the end of our hour. I want to say thanks to Christine and Luke both for joining me. Big thanks to everyone in the comments and who listened live and watched live, who joined us. It's always great to see you folks join us during the actual conversation. I want to say thanks to everyone who's going to listen to us later in their podcatcher of choice. As always, I want to say a big old thank you to Jim Metzendorf, our wonderful editor, who always makes us sound so great. And everybody, we'll be back, same bat time, same bat channel next week. And until then, have a great week. Bye, everybody.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye, guys.